Okay, so we're live. Um, Today I'm gonna be discussing Ace of Spades. So this is the Ace of Spades live discussion. I'm using Ecamm live for the first time, so I'm not sure. If somebody could let me know if they can hear me, that would be great. I'm gonna be looking at the live chat on my phone also. Hopefully I'm not lagging too bad. I just gotta share the link on Twitter. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So I can see the comments uh also on Ecamm. So this is nice. This is nice. I'm gonna wait for a few more people to join so we can talk about this book. I'm just gonna sit my phone over there. So this is Ace of Spades. Um, as people are kind of like joining in, let me know if you've picked up this book. Let me know if you've checked it out. Um, this is like my first time doing this, so I'm kind of like, okay, cool. So you got a galley of the book prior to it coming out. Yeah, I think I'm like a few seconds behind. So, okay, okay. So, hey, so I feel like I'm a few minutes, like a few seconds behind everybody, but this could just be the way that everything is going. All right, so I'm not sure if anybody has picked it up for a film yet. I had some complicated feelings about this book, and I guess I'll just start with for those that have not picked up the book, um the synopsis of Ace of Spades. So it says, all you need to know is, I'm here to divide and conquer like all great tyrants do, aces. When two Niveus Private Academy students, Devon Richards and Chiamaka Adebayo, are selected to be part of the elite school's senior prefects, it looks like their year is off to an amazing start. After all, not only does it look great on college applications, but it officially puts them in the running for valedictorian too. Shortly after the announcement is made, though, someone who goes by Aces begins sending anonymous text messages to reveal secrets about the two of them that turn their lives upside down and threaten every aspect of their carefully planned futures. As Aces shows no sign of stopping, what seemed like a sick prank quickly turns into a dangerous game with all the cards stacked against them. Can Devon and Chiamaka stop Aces before things become incredibly deadly? With heart pounding suspense and relevant social commentary comes a high octane thriller from debut author Farida Abike Iamidi. So hopefully I did not just butcher her name, but I think that really just starting off, and so if I'm like lagging behind and not answering questions very quickly, it's probably because like I feel like I'm talking a little bit beyond where it's streaming. But this book, so it was really described as like this Gossip Girl meets Get Out sort of novel. And so I started out reading it hard copy, and then uh, I ended up finishing it off listening to it on Audible. So I listened to the audiobook, and that was kind of because I was getting a little bit frustrated like reading the hard copy. And sometimes when I feel like I'm getting frustrated with the book, reading the hard copy, I feel like the audio can kind of just push me through, especially when it's a book that I'm hearing a lot about online. Like people were talking about this book a lot. Um, I remember when people were getting arcs of the book and they were loving it. And I even put it on my Black and Queer book list for 2021 list at the beginning of the year. I did a video on it and I posted it on my blog. And it um it was a book that I was really anticipating because it sounded like it was going to be like the private school thriller that I really had been looking for. Because I did watch Gossip Girl. I binge watched Gossip Girl my senior year of college. So it's been a couple years now since I've watched it. Um, it's been a couple of years since I watched Gossip Girl, but I enjoyed the show because it Gossip Girl felt so ridiculous in terms of some of the situations. It had that like these are teenage, basically like celebrities because of the fact that their parents have a lot of money and they've got private jets and they're going shopping all over the world, and they're hopping from city to city and getting in bars underage, and they're having fun, and it's kind of like risque a little bit, what these teenagers are doing, sort of like Degrassi but with rich kids. And that kind of is what I enjoyed about Gossip Girl. Um, Gossip Girl also, in terms of like the social commentary, it did touch on, like serious issues, I guess, of like teenagehood, but it wasn't as I don't know, it kind of felt like out of reach in a way because of the fact that these kids were rich, like super ridiculously rich. Um, and but Ace of Spades, I definitely didn't get Gossip Girl. I definitely didn't get Gossip Girl at all. So I agree. I agree. I didn't get Gossip Girl at all. Um, and then the Get Out comparisons, it to me what it almost felt like was uh what the book almost felt like was somebody who had read and watched all of these things, and then sort of attempted to like take certain pieces from each one and like merge them all into a book. But the pieces that are kind of like, eh, um, all right, so we got a comment. I remember when Gossip Girl was airing in real time, it was a big time for reality shows too, and there were a few Black teen series trying to capture that feeling, like Tia Williams, It Chicks. So yeah, it's it's so odd, and it is so odd to have a book sort of attempting to like capture that sort of feeling. I think that they tried. So once you get like halfway through the novel, that's when I started to see what the whole Get Out thing was attempting to do. Um and I didn't like it. I did not. Yeah, so the Gossip Girl, the anonymous texter thing. But the thing about Gossip Girl with the anonymous texting, it was like street gossip, you know? What I got from Ace of Spades was like traumatic things, very traumatic things. And like serious things, to specifically when it came to Devon, specifically when it came to Devon. So I guess really starting reading this novel, I was excited when I was really excited when I started reading it and I saw Devon's character. Devon's character was exciting to me because he had started out as um this black queer young man who kind of grew up like regular, and he was going to this school, and he was a musician. From the first couple of pages you find out that he's a musician, and that he wants to go to Juilliard, and that he kind of sets himself apart from the rest of these kids at this school, which reminded me of what's his name from Gossip Girl, like the main one. I forget his name, the one who ended up in the other show, the other TV show that came out recently, where he was really creepy. I don't know if anybody remembers. And y'all, my brother is about to come in because I need my laptop block, or else my laptop is going to die during the middle of this live stream. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Yeah, Dan. Um, so he kind of like felt like he was like a different character. But then But then what you get from Dan, um, but it also seemed like Dan was secure in himself. Um, on Gossip Girl, Devon ended up, and I don't know how everybody felt about this because I saw a lot of people like a lot of responses of people really enjoying Devon, but Devon, his father was in prison. Um, his mother was working three jobs. He uh he was dating a drug dealer. His boyfriend isn't really doing anything with his life. Um, he is constantly like talking about how much he hates the community that he's from. Um, and it just felt like Devon didn't have much sense of self in the book. Um, it felt like Devon was missing some things that would have made him a very dynamic character. And he's like constantly, and then you have like this like long suffering mother, like black mother who literally like his mother's extremely religious and she prays and prays, and he's scared to come out to his mother because of how religious she is. And while these are definitely lived experiences that many black queer teens have dealt with, it felt like the author of this book was like going really hard with this, like in a way that it didn't feel comforting to me. And I think that that is where I started to get frustrated, was the fact that I was reading this book and I started to get a headache. Like I had to put the book down. And sometimes YA does get really heavy. Um, Especially when discussing social issues in a way that doesn't feel like it's doing it in order to provide representation for kids and teenagers and young adults that are actually going through these things. Sometimes it just feels like dogpiling, like stereotypes almost. Um, it feels like authors are trying to do social commentary, but they're not as skilled at discussing these topics in a way that's not just like piling on trauma. Um, so I don't know how everybody felt about Devon. I don't know how everybody felt about Devon's character. If I could get some comments on Devon's character, and if somebody saw it differently, definitely let me know. Definitely let me know. Yeah, it definitely felt like there wasn't a lot of positive. There was not a lot of positive. Um so we got I started getting a headache too because it was just so much without any positive representation of blackness. Agreed, she packed in a lot: sexual identity, social acceptance, first loves and losses, peer pressure, systemic racism, and institutionalized discrimination. And that's where you start to lose the actual story. That's definitely where you begin to really like, it was so wild. So we have Devon being this character that wants to go to Juilliard, and there was no real discussion of his music. There weren't a lot of scenes talking about like what type of music he's actually doing. Like we saw that he played the keyboard a couple of times, but then like there was one scene where it was talking about him like putting together this music and using like other instruments and like background vocals. And I kind of was like, what exactly is Devon's passion? Like, what I want to know more about this drive to go to Juilliard, what kind of music he likes. And And when you had him, it was also interesting, and I think that, and I would definitely love to hear some comments about this, because the author is from South London. And if anybody did read the after the author's note. So the author's note said, "Dear reader, I wrote Ace of Spades at a very dark time in my life. I had just started university, which for many reasons was difficult. I had no friends. I really hated myself, and I was slowly climbing out of the sunken place and realizing just how bad things were for people who looked like me. I was reading more books, talking to more people, and having the realization that the circumstances I grew up in were no accident, but a system that was created to work against me. I grew up in South London in a place we call Ends, which in American terms would translate to the hood. My town is known for its diversity and massive black population. My high school was at least 90% black, and it wasn't until I got to my university in Scotland that I realized how much my community in London meant for me. Since starting university for the first time in my life, I could go days without seeing another person of color. I would walk around the campus and feel people watching me, like they all knew something about me, and it put me on edge. For the first time, I was getting weird questions like, "Is that your real hair? Can I touch it?" And having everyone in the lecture hall glance at me during the lectures on slavery and colonization of Africa. I genuinely felt like something insidious was happening, and while technically no one was really out to get me in the way Aces from my book is out to get my characters, there was something sinister happening. Something beyond my control that had everything to do with the violent systems in place. And I noticed every time I went to class or even walked around campus. Systems that made it rare that people from my background were able to come to university and thrive without any issues. In my first year, I had just started watching Gossip Girl for the first time and became deeply obsessed with it, binging all of the seasons in a matter of weeks. After watching the show, I remember wishing there were more black people. I was so in love with Blair Waldorf and her characterization, and I just thought it was such a shame that there were hardly any prominent shows like Gossip Girl and Pretty Little Liars where these hilarious, mean female leads were played by black actresses. From then on, the idea of Ace of Spades started to form, and before I knew it, I was in my second semester of university, and I had a first draft. This novel deals with a lot of important topics and themes such as classism, racism, and homophobia. It is also allegorical in many ways, which I hope you pick up on as you read. But one thing I was adamant on was keeping the setting as neutral as possible. With stories, it is so hard to ground readers without specifying a city or neighborhood. And so while there are mentions of places that are vaguely familiar, the story is meant to have no concrete ties to any place. I want people to read this book and not see the issues discussed as something that only affects some, but see that anti blackness is in fact a global issue, one that can't be diminished or pinned on one country or group. I started Ace of Spades as an 18-year-old freshman, lonely, depressed, and with a lot of questions about the world and myself. And through writing this book, I felt as though I was able to guide not only my characters on their journeys, but also myself. Writing this book was like a form of self therapy, and I hope that it is the same for Black people that pick this book up. The universe has a weird way of working, and it feels almost like fate that Ace of Spades will be published at the end of my senior year. It's like I have grown and developed alongside these characters, and I'm excited to get to meet them. I hope that in reading this story, you see that despite the darkness we are plagued with, which often feels inescapable, that not only are happy endings possible for Black people, but that we deserve them with love for Rita. Yeah, no problem. I know when you get like the arcs and galleys, a lot is missing, but that author's note, the author's note, it's hard to critique an author's note, but the author's note, especially after reading this book, it confused me even more, I have to say. Yeah, so in the author's note, she mentions that it's not supposed to be set in any particular place. Um, she said, I was adamant on keeping the setting as neutral as possible, but it felt like it felt like she was taking a lot of US centered issues. Um, it felt like it was very US centered for a novel that's not supposed to take place in any particular setting. And I had started reading the author's note because she talks about her experiences living in London, and growing up in London and attending university in London. Um, but specifically to Devon, and I'll mainly speak on Devon because I felt like Devon's identity is what's closest to mine. So we definitely we'll talk about Chiamaka in a second, but Devon specifically, it was very U.S. centered, especially with Devon, his relationship, the descriptions of this hood that he was living in, um, and this university, this private school just felt, the school system was definitely had like that like UK feel, but it felt like the outside of it was US-ish. Because did I think that Chiamaka's they had mentioned Chiamaka's parents like moving. Um so it just felt a little bit confusing. And then so you have Devon, who is this musician, and we still don't really know what kind of music Devon likes or really does. But it says that he bonds with his boyfriend over Tupac, which just, I don't know what time period this was specifically set in, but it just, I don't know, like maybe it was that, and maybe I was nitpicking at that point, but them bonding over Tupac just felt like I don't understand what music young black kids are listening to. Specifically if we're talking about like the US. Like Lil Baby, Kendrick, I don't I was just I was sort of just frustrated with how they built up Devon and sort of like how they described his character. I it just um Yeah, the mention of the prefix. So we got a comment, read your comment on stereotypes. Maybe that was a bit intentional. Devon and Chiamaka are on the opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, but are both victims with equal maliciousness within the same academic system. Um, the school system was very UK. I agree. Wasn't there any mention of prefix? So the prefix thing also felt like it was like they mentioned it and then it was never really mentioned again. Also, like, why are Chiamaka and Devon at the top of their class? The fact that they're at the top of their class, but nobody really knows who Devon is. Um, like they didn't really like the whole winter formal thing. It was barely there. The planning process, like the prefects never met with each other. It kind of just was like started and then never really mentioned. Um, yeah. Yeah, the fact that Devon can also walk to school, that was another interesting thing. Like no sort of bus system that was really mentioned. Devon's community outside of him talking about how terrible it is and how people are selling drugs um and just hanging out on street corners, that wasn't really delved into. There was no real description of his community. I I I kind of have to go back to the hate you give, and I did a video critiquing the hate you give. But even in the hate you give, when they're describing Star's neighborhood, they're they don't just talk about like the more clear effects of systemic racism and how they have sort of um, like attacked these communities and led to like incarceration and lack of jobs and poverty. They also showed like the people within the neighborhood, the smiling faces, how Star does actually know like the people that own the shops and all of these different things. And that's definitely what I was missing. Devon was just very, very negative. Chiamaka also, when she mentioned it in her author's note, Chiamaka was not funny to me. Did anybody think that Chiamaka was funny? Because I personally did not think that Chiamaka was an entertaining character. I was very frustrated with Chiamaka's character. Um, and how sort of heavy-handed the social commentary was. Um, I think that there is a way that authors can insert social commentary into books without it feeling preachy. And it almost felt kind of preachy with Chiamaka's character. Like she would read I actually tabbed some of the things. It was so one of the things, it was towards the end, it was on page 239. They were talking about it's when Chiamaka was talking to Jamie and was asking why they were attacked. Um, why they think that people were personally attacking them. And she had confronted her friend Jamie and said, "Is it because we're black? There is nothing except Jamie and me, no hallways, no whispers, just us." Calling me racist, he asked. Growing up, I realized quite quickly, that people hate being called racist more than they hate racism itself, which is why I'm not surprised when Jamie pauses, places his hand in his pocket, and slowly swivels back around as he speaks. On his face, there is an unsettling smile that grows wider the longer I stare at it. He steps forward. Would I have touched you if I hated black chicks? Yeah, she really wasn't. It felt like the author was kind of just really trying really hard to get her points across without sort of like sliding in the points in a way that gives you an enjoyable, entertaining read while also making you reflect on social issues. Um, I also had tabbed a couple of the Devon statements about his neighborhood that kind of just got under my skin. Um, One of the unspoken laws I grew up with was don't be a snitch. Even though every part of my body is fighting it, I say, I feel like a lot's happening. I can feel the hood me slapping the private school boy seated in this chair around the face, threatening me. And then in terms of the piling on, um, says because it's they sort of did this thing where Devon would like he periodically would like sink into the water. I guess it was like this like metaphor of him trying to escape what the world he was living in, and it would pop up at random times during the book. And it said, but I see their fists, I hear them shout, and I know in that moment that kissing me is bad, very bad. I feel dirty. They made me feel so effing dirty. And then I'm on the beach, the sand getting in my sneakers, the waves calling out to me, the water crashing violently with its arms wide open. The sea is so perfect to me, it makes me feel at peace, but it's nothing like that, not in the slightest. It's chaotic. It swallows lives and people. The waves scream, hit, beat the sand down like the sand is an abomination. And even though the sea is this monster, I'm drawn to its chaos. I grew up on that shit, that chaotic shit. It's all I recognize. My pa and his major fuck up, my ma and her fuck ups, with her messy, abusive boyfriends who left us when her clothes would burst from her swollen belly, to me and my fuck ups, my everyday fuck ups. So then that also added on to like finding out that his mother has been in abusive relationships. Um, and it just was a lot. It was a lot. It felt like she was trying to do a whole lot with this book that I'm not exactly sure that she was the most capable writer to do. And I've noticed this in a couple of YA books. I've noticed this in a couple of YA books. But for those that read it, what did you feel like the message was of this book? That's kind of what I've sort of been trying to figure out. What exactly is the message of this book? Yes, this was her debut. This was her debut. Because I was just I think a big thing was just sort of grappling with um why she chose to write this book. Why she chose to write this book. I gave her a break on the rating because I thought it was her first release. Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is her debut novel, her very first one. So everybody's kind of like typing in the chat. So while I was reading this book, I also I was reading Ghosts in the Schoolyard by Eve L. Ewing. And this is about racism in school closings on Chicago's South Side. So it talks about the school system in Chicago, public schools, racism, how like systemic racism and public policy negatively affects specifically black students and within Chicago's public school system. And I was reading this and learning a lot more about um, just some of the things that it was raising a lot of issues that I see um, in like school systems, the ones I grew up in. I'm also a teacher in public schools. I'm a public school high school teacher, and so I was learning a lot, and also seeing a lot of the ways that that historically racism has impacted school systems and black students within schools. And so this led to me doing a thread on Twitter, and and Miss WLC Reader, you saw my thread. I know we had discussed it, and I had done a thread on public schools. Um, and so I'll just kind of read from that thread because the thread was sort of triggered by um, me reading this book, and I just gotta scroll through Twitter, and I'll link it in the description below. But I said that it was me trying to find YA books about Black kids who attend public schools. Private school narratives have a chokehold on the YA community. It seems that while trying to represent the experiences of Black children who are the sole Black face or one of just a few in private school spaces, Black YA writers have begun to completely ignore the experiences of the majority of Black children who attend public schools. And this has turned into, when discussing racism into their books, hyper focusing on things like microaggressions and ultimately centering whiteness, rather than discussing any serious systemic issues within the educational system, creating a work written about for Black children without making it super traumatic so that non Black readers can empathize, or creating something new and innovative for Black children to read. And that whole thread was inspired was while I was in the middle of reading this book, because the private school narrative, I think, really the private school narrative does a disservice, especially when you're talking about racism. And I I would like go back and grab all of the books that I have read, the YA books specifically that I have read that focus on private schools. And they all are sort of attempting to discuss racism, and but they always focus on microaggressions, and they always seem to really center on whiteness. And I enjoyed Amari and the Night Brothers, but Amari and the Night Brothers was private schools. The Hate You Give was private schools. This book was private schools. I even think that Punching the Air, I think that Punching the Air might have been private schools. Um, there's just the list goes on and on. And Ace of Spades felt like it was so focused on what these white children are saying to Devon and um saying to Devon and Chiamaka, that it's not really getting to the core of systemic racism. It's sort of like focusing on Chiamaka not feeling comfortable wearing her natural hair. It's focused on, desirability. It's focused on um it's focused on like these slight things that are said to Devon about the clothes that he's wearing. But these are Black children that are in a private school setting. Um, and it doesn't really seem to, like, we need to really talk about just in general that private schools are not, somebody had tweeted this a little while ago, private schools are not the, um, Black parents need to realize that private schools are 9 times out of 10 not the best. It's not the best choice for your child. Um, you're searching for a better education, a safer environment for them, but then they end up in situations like Chiamaka and Devon, where it seems like they're full of a ton of self hatred. They're dealing with more bad than good, and I feel like if if the author would have kind of just dove a little bit more into like I just I don't know, just I'm not even sure where even to really go with that, but it just felt like it was just very very traumatic. It didn't feel like the audience was black kids. It didn't feel like this was offering representation for Black readers. It kind of felt like it was like maybe a sort of like preachy situation for maybe white readers to read, but it didn't feel like it was for Black kids. Um, I went to high school. I went to high school at a magnet school. Um, but I definitely would love to hear like I went to public school my entire life. So it's always a very frustrating thing for me because I feel like YA writers don't seem to enjoy writing about Black kids' experiences at public schools. So we got something about the message. I think it's a reminder that systemic racism is real. Unfortunately, not everyone will be pulling for kids to be successful. The focus is on awareness. Maybe it's because I actually read YA as a teen, but I notice a lot of these books push so many different messages about understanding Black people, but tend to end up decentering Black kids. Um, I had a unique experience as a teen that I went to a white private school. Um, that I went to a white private school half the day. VTech with Black and brown kids from the city where I lived the other half. Um, Private school is the long game. You go for the education, resources, the network, the association, etc. It used to be a stepping stone, not for the Black experience, for leverage. Yeah, and I definitely understand that. It's just very odd that YA writers focus um on private schools when the majority of black kids do not attend private schools. And it seems to be like the premise for almost every single YA book. It seems to be like the sole, like you've got a black kid and they're one of the few black kids at their high school, um and they sort of are like figuring out who they are, type of thing. Like it's trying to be that, it's trying to do that coming of age sort of thing for like these kids that aren't necessarily like, I don't know, they're still kind of like confused on where they stand in terms of their blackness. And I think that that's a big thing for me with this book. I would love some more thoughts from viewers. It had its benefits and losses. Like there were more scholarships offered to the public school kids, and some of the state schools didn't even come to visit our private schools. But do you think the setting private school mirrors the corporate world or workforce where most likely they'll be in the minority at some point? So I think that the setting does can sometimes in a way mirror that. But if you're specifically talking to teenagers and young adults, and I'll use this as an example. Personally, when I give these books to my own students, or I'm reading a book and I'm thinking about suggesting it to my own student, can they identify with these experiences? And and so when you're reading this book as a black individual who has who has not attended a private school, um it all just seems, it's not really like helping you out in terms of like discussing racism. um like I remember when I was doing the hate you give with my own students, and there was like the fried chicken joke in the hate you give, and kids were just reading it and they were like, "Oh, I would go crazy if that ever happened." And it's just like this isn't something that's like enlightening to them. Because it really is like not, it's like the farthest thing from their experience, what they've experienced in their own schools. Um, so it feels like these experiences, while I think that there's a sect of black students that have definitely dealt with this, and the ones that do attend private schools, but it seems to be the only thing that authors are highlighting, and it's centering whiteness. It centers whiteness. So I think that if you were to solely focus on the actions of these black characters and their experiences, rather than sort of kind of like using this book to aiming the book at white readers, because the hate you give, at the end of the day, um books like The Hate You Give and different things like that are, when I'm kind of reading them back and thinking about them, these are those books that are supposed to help And let me know if you disagree. I'm always here for like a good healthy debate. It feels like these are the books that you hand white children to help them understand racism and help them understand the experiences of black people. What is this providing for black children? Because Ace of Spades, you have this gorgeous cover with these two black kids. You have this gorgeous cover with these two black kids. But what is this book offering black kids? What is this book offering black kids? And it happens a lot in YA. So I'm glad that you're asking that question because it really seems to be a big thing in all of the YA books. Um I've also noticed that for a lot of YA, so many authors choose to place the setting in private schools, and I'm like, where are the public schools? Hey, because for a lot of black kids, including myself, who went to public art high school, go to public schools, I want to see public black high schools because that's what a lot of us experience. Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I went to a public school like right in the middle, like in the inner city, um, and so I think that that experience is something I'm really missing out on in a lot of books and seeing like black kids interact with other black kids. Um, and somebody had mentioned the fact that that seems to be like a big thing. Even if you attend a private school, it's not automatically like you hate all the other black kids, like the other two black kids. Like there always seems to be like this internal monologue, like I don't want to hang out with the other black kid, which is odd, which is very odd. Also, black private schools and suburbs exist. Yes, I want books for black folks by black folks. I would love to read about an all black. Yeah, like why can't you make like an all black private school? You know, like make it a little bit more, like a different experience, something with a dose of magic. These are always really serious stories too. Things that are just kind of like there's not really anything good. I would love to read about, yeah. I agree. So many of these books are for Black adult readers who want people to understand what they experience, and for white readers to understand what we go through. Yeah. Um, and it's like I think that this book, I don't know. It's just it's odd for a YA audience. It particularly is really odd for a YA audience when you're trying to like because she said she wanted a Black Blair Waldorf, but we're not getting a Black Blair Waldorf. We're not getting any sort of like entertainment. This book was not entertaining. This book did not feel entertaining to me. I feel like I've said that a couple of times, but when I first decided to pick it up, I was excited because I thought that it was going to be like a drama. It felt like it was going to be a drama. So the end, towards the end, how did everybody feel about like towards the end of the book? Because that's when it really started like going really left for me. Like post Chiamaka and Devin working together. That's when it all really started to go really when they started figuring out exactly what Aces was. Okay, I'm seeing some new comments. Um, were there black people in Gossip Girl? With the marketing and mention of Gossip Girl? Um, I naively think white and Get Out. I didn't think the setting would be all black. Yeah, and I think that if you want black, like to say that you're trying to do Gossip Girl with black representation, why not make it a majority black? Why would you only have these two black characters? Um, that kind of threw me off a little bit. And Get Out, I, I think that the interpretation of sort of like trying to interpret those two things in your own way, it kind of just threw things off. In my experience, the black kids in private schools may not all be friends, but they know each other and have each other's backs. Yeah, it felt so weird. It felt really weird to have these two kids that literally, like, you're the only black, because it said that every 10 years they accept two black kids at this private school. One, that wasn't adding up for me. The math was not mathing at all. Um, but they know each other, but they completely ignore each other. Like, I think the first time that Chiamaka and Devin talked was when they was after when they first were accepted as prefects. Like, that's the entire, like, they're seniors now. It's a little bit odd to me. She's obviously targeting mainstream, so all black school instantly goes to a niche market. But I think that people would love the idea of reading in all, and so if and I think that that's sort of like the complicated thing, or the thing that frustrates me. If you're going to put black people on the cover of your book and you're saying that this is offered as representation for black kids, why is the niche market bad? Why are you listening to what the world is telling you when they're saying that you need to center this on whiteness and just have these two black kids on the cover? The two black kids on the cover are the only black children that you meet almost the entire book. You know how the publishing industry is. Yeah. And I think that that's continuing to frustrate me more and more every single day. And that's bad that stories about black schools still, oh, yep, that's bad that stories about black schools still equal a niche market. Then what's the point of pushing for diversity? That part made no sense. That's way too much work to be racist to only two people. Yeah, and that's another thing, like, and in terms of understanding racism and the fact that it's something that literally you cannot escape, the fact that they choose two black students, just accept two black students at this private school, this huge private school with rich, insanely rich students. They only accept two black kids, and nobody has noticed that only these two black kids pop up every 10 years. Not the media, not parents. Like, there's none of the black parents were like, you know, why am I like, how does that even work? It's kind of crazy. I saw more books about black kids in public schools before publishing decided diversity is trendy. You know? And let me just sip my coffee on that. It does seem like, in all honesty, we got more books, like, and somebody, even though I think we found out that the author, the Bluford High author, somebody had put on, yeah, that the Bluford High, one of the main Bluford High authors was white, but regardless, we got like the Bluford High series. We got Angela Johnson writing about black kids in public schools and their experiences, as teenagers. And, we got books about black kids in public school. I mean, we got The Skin I'm In. I'm blanking on Sharon Draper. We got all of Sharon Draper's books and all of these different things, and it feels odd. It feels odd that now that people do feel um that people now do feel like, oh, Sharon G. Flake wrote The Skin I'm In. It feels odd that now that people are trying to, like, push like books by Black authors and books about the Black experience and all these different things like that, that we're not getting books about the Black experience in YA. In YA. Also, why are Chiamaka and Devon the only two Black students? Like, make it make sense. I felt the same with Bree from Legendborn. I was like, girl, please, there's a Black student meetup. Go to that. Um, that reminds me of something. Yeah, it was the one show, the new television show. It actually came out a couple months ago, and it's a girl and she is biracial and she moves to the town with her mother. And I can't think about it right now, but the Black kids are literally like, "Come on, girl, like hang out with us," and she doesn't want to hang out with them. It was like a Netflix series or something like that. All of those situations seem very odd to me. Hers was a little bit different because she was like she was definitely like struggling in terms of like figuring out who she was as a person as like a biracial um individual. But yeah, like where is the Black student group? I All of that stuff, it throws me off. It throws me off. It really, really throws me off. I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping up with these comments and seeing the viewers and things. Yeah, overall, Legendborn was especially odd in that it was set on a real campus. UNC Chapel Hill has such a large Black student union, they have to be selective with membership. So I haven't read Legendborn. I've wanted to read Legendborn. It's always, I think that a lot, I'm trying to get caught up with a lot of the like newer YA releases like Legendborn, and then I want to read who there's a bunch of those books that are very like similar to Legendborn. Uh, I want to definitely get caught up with them and actually read them eventually. Like I would love to see books with just a little bit more community in them, a little bit more community, because even though in the end you sort of see camaraderie between Devon and Chiamaka, um, it shouldn't have to take all that in a book. It shouldn't have to take all that in a book. So, so any final comments? Any final comments on this? Let me make sure that I'm like liking these comments. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I'm gonna keep this live up, to make sure that, I might give this book another listen, another read. Um, yes, exactly that. I think Blood Like Magic has that community family feel from the reviews I have seen. Yeah, it's um the Black Kids. I read the Black Kids, and I included. I didn't do a full review, but I included it in one of my reading wrap ups from like last summer. And the Black kid, she was hanging out with all white students at the private school she attended. Um, and then she ends up, after falling out with her friend group, finally building community with the other Black students at her school. And that was a beautiful thing to see. Um, and it was kind of frustrating how long it took her to get there, but it was beautiful to see. Thank you, Phyllis Rhodes, for joining in. I appreciate it. Thank you for your comments. I hope you check out more YA, and then we can have more of these discussions. Um, so yeah, I think it's always just like you want to see more community. You want to see just these books where, because it feels like the marketing. It feels like even though they're marketing these books with black faces on the cover, slapping black faces on the cover, these books just don't feel like they're for black kids. Um, and I kind of felt the same way in a way about like Cinderella is Dead. A book where you have this black princess, this black princess or this black young woman who ends up sort of like playing like the Cinderella sort of role, but it just didn't feel like there was much. It didn't have it the way that I thought it would, for the fact that you have this book with this black face on the cover. Um, so yeah, that's just a frustrating thing. That's a frustrating thing for me. But overall, especially for those that are replaying this back, um, just I want to hear what everybody has to say about Ace of Spades. I definitely want to hear more talk about this book, um, because it's it's kind of interesting, especially within the book community, these books coming out and people promoting them, and you know them getting all this hype, especially over the past year, these books that are supposed to be providing representation. And I never want to be one of those people that's afraid to criticize these books, afraid to read them and really let people know how I feel. Um, you know, you got to be critical of these books also, black author or not, especially YA books, books that you're giving to young people. And so that's kind of why I wanted to do this live. I wanted to see what everybody else thought. If I was like the only one who was just feeling some type of way about this book, because I know a lot of people that got advanced copies, and I know like they were sending out arcs of the book, um, and it was getting a lot of hype and people were very excited about it. But and I haven't watched anybody else's reviews, so I definitely will be checking out other people's reviews after this, to just see where everybody else's thinking was. But overall, I just really didn't enjoy Ace of Spades like I thought I would. It didn't do it for me. um so I think this book is worthy of conversation. I personally would not be recommending it to a ton of people to read, um, because it just wasn't it for me. It wasn't it for me. It wasn't an enjoyable read. I was exhausted after I finished this book. So, um, if you have read it, if you are reading it, let me know your thoughts. But we've come to the end of this live, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on Twitter and in the comments after I end the live. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more lives. And thanks for tuning in. And always remember that you are loved. Okay? Thanks for tuning in.